Thank you very much, Lena. That was an excellent presentation. And I do have to say that Chopin Technologies has one of the most active applications teams. And so if you do have questions about some of the case studies that Lena presented, I would highly encourage you reaching out, because if the applications team hasn't already done that type of work, they can typically do something to find an answer very quickly. So they are very responsive and very much on top of their products and applications. So with that, I think we're ready to start answering some questions.
Okay, yes, absolutely. So damaged starch is basically a granule of starch that has been mechanically damaged. So that always happens during milling, and that will depend on the milling procedure, of course, but also on the hardness of the wheat. And this is important because damaged starch will impact a lot the water absorption capacity, the amount of free sugar, and so the color of the final product. It will impact also the shape, the size, and many different parameters. You have various options, really. Here also, it can be considered as a multi-factorial approach. For instance, the protein network quality will have an action, the water amount that you put into the dough, also the quality of flour, of course, but like how long you let the product in the oven. Like if you want a more crunchy product, you might want to let it a little bit longer, as if you were wanting a chewy product. So again, this is there is no not one answer, but many of them.
Yeah, and there are other aspects of the process, like the lamination stage. You can play with the number of layers that you're laminating, and you can play with the amount of water, as long as it's within the processing capabilities of the line that you're using. And you can also play around with your fat source. I mean, you can really go into the formula and play around to manipulate those textures. And I know a common ingredient solution is to look at different types of starches when you're playing with texture as well. So there are a number of levers that you can pull. It's just going to be whatever makes sense for your formulation, from a formulation standpoint, and what makes sense for you from a processing standpoint.
Here we have presented various solutions, including the Mix Lab, for instance. So question here, if I rephrase, would be how, if I understand correctly, would be how to control water absorption, how to know how much. And so here I would say you can make trials online, but you can also determine it with our equipment, such as with the Mix Lab, by just putting water into the dough and see what the consistency is. And if it's the good consistency, then you have the right water amount. Interesting question here. Okay. So if you would like to start a Q&A lab from scratch, I would say that the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the most important thing I need to control? Or what is my problem, maybe? Like, do I have issues with color or with the shape? And by doing that, we can link the problem with a cause, and then we can link the cause with a solution. And so I would recommend to start with this specific solution. Like if it's a color issue, then we have seen that it can be related to the damaged starch, and so the enzymatic would be a good solution. If it's about the shape, well, in this case, alveograph would be a dedicated solution. That really depends on each individual process and final product. Yes, absolutely. That would depend on with which equipment, but here the Mixer Lab would be the most interesting equipment. Actually, we have done a webinar also in collaboration with BAKERview a few months ago about Mixer Lab and gluten-free flours. And basically, you can analyze every type of gluten-free flours with the Mixer Lab. So that would be the best, the way to go.
So it can relate to final product texture. The thing to remember, especially when you're dealing with cookies, the fat and the sugar are also going to play a significant role in that texture. So when you're dealing with high fat, high sugar systems, and these are also low moisture systems, the amount of starch gelatinization is generally reduced. So there will likely be a relationship, but it will probably not be as strongly influenced by starch gelatinization parameters as much as it is by some of the other ingredients that are in the formula. So you can certainly exert some control over it using an instrument like the Mixer Lab and making sure your flour is within the right operational target range. But also I would suggest looking at some of your other formulation ingredients as well.
Exactly, that's true. Like when you add sugar into the flour, you can definitely see the impact on the gelatinization with the Mixer Lab. Okay, so here I would say that we would have 3 different equipment that can give different information about the protein. You would have the SLC that will tell you how much the protein are able to absorb. Then you will have the alveograph, which will give you information about how the gluten network can expand and how it resists deformation. Is it able to come back to its original position? Is it elastic? And finally, you would have the Mixer Lab. And the Mixer Lab gives you information about how the protein network will behave during mixing. So development time and stability, weakening during mixing, and also about the protein denaturation due to temperature, which is a good indication of the final volume of the product. So again, you can have various solutions, and I would say the adequate solution will depend on the issue that you observe.
The falling number for soft wheat flour will typically be above 300 seconds. Any lower than that, and it would indicate some form of pre-harvest sprouting.
Yes, it is possible to obtain a water absorption value thanks to the Aqa Lab. By making a specific protocol that is called the consistograph, and that lasts about 5 minutes. And then we have the p-value, which is tenacity, but that's a different value. Both can be obtained with the Aqa Lab. So. Again, I would say that truly depends on what you want to manage, what is your problem. Again, if you have a problem with color, then aesthematic truly maybe. If you have problem with shape of the graph, if you have a problem with water absorption, Mixer Lab, etc., etc. But at least you would need one rheological equipment to understand how the dough is behaving, and also one equipment to tell you why it is behaving this way. So that would be a good couple to start, like Mixer Lab and SRC, for instance.
Yeah, I agree with Lena here. The other thing that I would suggest is that the industry is increasingly moving towards the use of SRC. So I would say that SRC is almost a required piece of equipment, especially to communicate back and forth with your milling flour supplier. And then also the alveograph has been traditionally the gold standard in terms of evaluating cookie and cracker quality as well. So if you had to start with two pieces of equipment just to get going, not necessarily knowing exactly what your problems might be, I would say SRC and then alveograph as well. And from there, you can build out according to what you find your needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it looks like we are running up on the end of our time for the seminar. So once again, just want to give a very big thank you to Lena for sharing her knowledge and expertise with us today. And of course, Chopin Technologies for sponsoring the seminar. The recording is going to be available next week on the Baker Academy. And of course, we couldn't get to all the questions today, so please feel free to ask any unanswered questions in the Baking Industry Professionals Facebook group, and also the same group on LinkedIn. And of course, Lena's email address has been shared as well. You are also welcome to reach out directly to Lena with more specific types of questions. So again, thank you, Lena. Thank you, Chopin Technologies. And thank you, everyone, for signing on today to participate in this seminar. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Jane. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, BAKERview, for having me. That was great.